The story begins with a quote telling us about a forest demon. It is said the demon could give eternal life, and it came to be called the Red Coat. We see an injured woman tied to a tree. Zooming out, we observe the forest in which this took place. Elsewhere in the forest, we see someone in red clothes beside a lifeless animal. Perhaps it's the Red Coat. The scene changes to show a man walking inside a building while talking about family. He is Reynolds, saying many of the world's problems stem from people being in places they aren't supposed to be in. It has been that way since Moses' time. He keeps talking as he enters a room with others in it. His speech segues into being about race, and we come to understand he is opposed to the mixing of people of different races. He calls the great melting pot a great pot of excrement instead. According to Reynolds, if people don't wake up to this soon, mankind will end up being a breed of mongrels. After he sits down, he tells an Asian man sitting in front of him that the Asian man is very resourceful and industrious. Reynolds sees him working from morning to night in the fields, but what's important to him is family, and the Asian man isn't that. Once the Asian man starts to say why he arrived there, an older woman interrupts him to say he arrived there because he's a peace-loving, reasonable man. The problem is that she does not assign those same qualities to Reynolds and his people. Reynolds places a document for the Asian man to sign. He says it doesn't matter what the bank says, and the Asian man's family will be much safer when he signs the document. Yet the man says this is best left for another time before he starts leaving. Becoming infuriated, Reynolds throws a bottle at the man for walking away. He shows us how vile he is early on by following this act, by stabbing the poor man to his demise. The scene ends with the deceased man lying in the back of a pickup truck to get taken to an unknown place. 3 months later, we see a school bus riding on a road within a forest. Inside it, a few of its passengers are shown. A girl turns around to look at an Asian boy for a short time and sees he is looking at her. No one says a word. The only words we hear are the ones being emitted by the radio. It mentions the Red Coat being an urban legend. Soon the bus stops and 2 boys exit from it. Since the Asian boy looked at the girl, the other boy took offense to this. Thus, he punches the Asian boy prior to telling him Rachel is off limits. If he catches him looking at her again, they will have problems. Seeing what happened, Rachel looks concerned. This is the kind of racism we are being introduced to. Moving along, we observe the interior of a home. A framed photo is there of the man whom Reynolds ruthlessly took the life of. Afterward, the boy we recently saw comes home, and his mother asks him what happened. He is Edward, having to lie to her that nothing happened. Despite her staying silent, we see she isn't buying his lie. We see a man walking in the forest. Observing from his point of view, we see he is dizzy. At night, we see 2 people near Edward's residence. They are trying to light a Molotov cocktail, but thankfully they fail. Jan, the mother, exits her home with a shotgun while yelling who is out there. She searches with Edward, yelling to whoever is there to show themselves. Once she points her weapon in a dark area, a hand grabs it. However, Edward slams the man with a shovel to knock him out. The next scene has him in Yan's home, where she tends to the unconscious man with her son's help. Edward asks her why they brought him inside. He says the man could be the Red Coat or one of Reynolds' friends. He also says they can't call the police and nearly yells at his mom about how they can't trust anyone in this area. Yan tells him that when the man returns to himself, they will get him out. The scene shifts to show the man struggling in his sleep. He dreams of the injured woman we saw in the beginning and wakes up. Edward's younger sister, Emily, is playing with him. Upon being found by her mom, Emily is urged to stop doing it. The man is now lying there with open eyes. Soon Edward watches his family get into a car to ride away. Left alone, he enters the room where the man is being kept. There, the man surprises him by saying he needs blood. Not knowing how to respond to this, Edward leaves the room. We see Jan at a gas station store, where she asks the employee, named Sam, if he has Tylenol. Alas, Reynolds enters to tell her he could get a doctor to give her what she needs. He also says he hasn't seen the lady around town much lately, adding that he understands the reason for it. He lies to her by saying it's shameful for her husband to have run away. He heard it happens a lot with people of her race. Reynolds continues to behave repulsively, saying her race has no real sense of family or loyalty. Afterward, he transitions to talking about the lives of the people who occupy the store. When he talks about Sam's life, the latter wants him to stop, but Reynolds says he's merely painting a picture for Jan to understand. He likens the town to a spider web, where everyone's lives are intertwined, and the threads are strong. Hearing him say she came from a village makes her angry. She is from the city, Jan says, before emphasizing its many aspects of civilization, not unlike the country she's currently residing in. She calls Reynolds pathetic and adds she's not scared of him. Once she exits the store, he says a racial slur about her for everyone to hear. The wicked man follows this by telling Sam if he disrespects him again, he will take his life. In the next scene, Reynolds approaches one of his people to ask what happened at Jan's residence. The man says the bottle slipped, and a dog was barking. He is the one who dropped the Molotov cocktail earlier. We see Rachel walking whilst the boy from the school bus gets in front of her. He is Petri, putting his hand on her, which prompts her to demand that he take it off. Walking past her is Reynolds, saying he's going to see her grandmother. Rachel is unfortunate to have this man for her father. Settling in Petrie's area, Reynolds tells the boy about what he was doing at Petrie's age, learning how to handle a branding iron. He also says he never forgets the pain of his burning flesh. After he leaves, his words leave a scared impression on Petrie. Returning home from school, Edward enters the room where they are keeping the stranger. He sees his sister playing nurse with him. The young girl tells him he needs a bath, and the man tells Edward again that he needs fresh life liquid. The boy doesn't know how to get it for him, but the stranger says this is a farm, therefore it shouldn't be too difficult to acquire such a substance. Thus, Edward enters a chicken pen, and the next thing we see is a lifeless chicken. Edward is now ascending the stairs with a bowl of the chicken's life liquid. He enters the man's room to place the bowl on the floor. Taking it, the stranger drinks the substance, which causes a flurry of images to attack him. One of those images is of the woman tied to the tree. Seeing such an unusual sight, Edward can only ask the stranger one question, if he is the red coat. Yet the man does not answer. At a bar, Reynolds is with his mother, who is not well. She tells him she made this bar her life, and it's right that she meets her demise there. Reynolds replies she is too stubborn to perish before kissing her. We see a policeman arrive at Jan's residence. When Jan meets him, the officer says her dog has been taking the lives of sheep. Despite her telling him the dog has been chained all night, he still wants to take the animal. Edward tells the officer to get off their land, making the racist say that Edward's land is on the other side of the world. After he insults the boy some more, the stranger comes out to ask the policeman if he has a warrant. The lawman becomes offended, rudely asking who the stranger is. In a short time, he starts laughing and says Jan has found herself a new man. Once the stranger tells the officer to leave, he provokes the racist to point his gun at the stranger. As he is approaching the stranger with it, the latter takes the gun away and holds the officer against the wall. He points the gun at the corrupt lawman, which alas gets him into unlawful territory. Following this, the stranger says his uniform doesn't mean anything around there. He allows the officer to drive away. The next scene has the policeman talking to Reynolds in the bar. He lies that the family was not at home. The mother says maybe the red coat got them. Reynolds is not the type to believe in the red coat. However, his mom likes to think he is out there laughing at them. She says the red coat knows that only one thing matters: survival. Getting angry, Reynolds tells his mother it is nonsense. It's a story made up to scare children, but the mother says he is out there waiting for all of them, and he feeds on fear. To survive, she says they have to feed him. Speaking of feeding, we see Edward giving the stranger more blood to consume. He asks the man if he drinks human liquid too. This prompts the stranger to ask if Edward is offering. The boy doesn't want to reply to such a question, so he leaves. Left alone, the stranger drinks the fluid and remembers violence. It is too incoherent to say what he remembers, though the violence involves Reynolds. Afterward, Jan sees something awful outside that causes her to yell out to Edward in sorrow. When he exits the house to see what she's looking at, Jan feels the need to send her son back inside. Finally, we get to see what the awful circumstance is. Someone took the life of their... At home, Jan lights incense for her lifeless husband, and Edward walks in to watch her pray. He tells her that his father can't hear them since he is no longer of this world. The family is elsewhere, having buried their dog. Edward tells the stranger that Reynolds tried to take their land. He also says Reynolds took his father's life. His mom still thinks he is alive, but Edward knows he isn't. The boy says Reynolds deserves to perish. Once he asks the stranger to help them, the man walks away. At night, we see someone standing outside the bar, looking at it. We can guess who the mysterious person is as he slowly starts walking towards it. Upon his entering, we see it's the benevolent stranger. Being inside the bar seems to remind him of what took place there 10 years earlier. We see him in a police uniform, drawing close to Reynolds and his mom. He says they received a distress call from Reynolds' neighbor, who said he or she heard a woman screaming. The officer needs to do a welfare check on Reynolds' wife. We learn the stranger's name is Fallon, whom Reynolds tells to leave because the latter's wife wasn't the one who called him. However, Fallon insists on seeing his wife, which makes the vile man angry. Now the mother starts to speak, telling Fallon that the English think they can simply walk in there and disrespect her place of business due to them wearing a badge. She tells him the phrase he would say 10 years later to the other officer we saw. The phrase is that his uniform doesn't mean anything around there. After those harsh words, we return to the present. Fallon finds the mother in her chair with no one by her side. While he looks at her, we get a brief flashback of how she looked at a certain woman from possibly long ago. The mother quietly tells Fallon they took his life. When he leaves, she probably sees the red coat before her head slowly falls back. On the next day, Jan sits at home with a loaded shotgun. Fallon shows up, asking her if she knows how to use it. As she's looking at her framed photos, Jan says they are her brother and mother. Her mom perished not long after they moved there. She was ill, so she was taken to the hospital. But on the following day, the nurse told Jan her mom was deceased. She's upset that the nurse giving her the awful news was just one more thing on her to-do list. Jan cries, saying they are merely trying to find a home. Her husband was a farmer, and this was his American dream. Again, we are taken back 10 years into the past. Fallon is sleeping in bed with the woman we saw in the beginning. Since she is black, we realize this could create another scenario filled with racism. He hears someone walking, but once he opens his eyes, it's already too late. Reynolds slams him into an unconscious state. Subsequently, he exits the house with his people while carrying the woman. He puts her in the pickup truck and they arrive at a place where they put ropes around the tree we saw from the start. Fallon is partially conscious as he watches the woman getting tied to it. He also gets restrained to the tree. After the culprits ride away, an unusual hand draws near Fallon. Returning to the present, we see Edward in school. He looks at Rachel right before Petrie bumps into him on purpose. He asks the hooligan what his problem is, and the hooligan turns around to tell Edward that it's him. Petrie slams him against the locker, prompting Edward to hold him in a headlock. Thankfully, a teacher is there to break up the fight. Back at Yan's home, Fallon remembers his girlfriend. Soon Edward comes home, informing Fallon about his fight. He also says that everywhere he goes, he sees people watching him, sometimes staring him down. The boy knows people like Fallon can't feel it because they're not outsiders. Fallon tells him nothing stays the same. He follows these words by saying the question Edward has to ask himself is when change arrives, how will he embrace it? Moving along, we see Reynolds near his deceased mother. He places a photo of his father into her coffin and weeps. In a short time, he looks out the window due to hearing a motor. It causes him to approach his policeman friend who is currently not in uniform. Reynolds asks him why he didn't tell Reynolds about Yan's house guest. The man says Fallon was simply a drifter, and he admits to having made the mistake of not informing Reynolds about him. Shifting to Fallon outside, he continues to remember his girlfriend. Suddenly, we see a furious Reynolds running behind him to punch the man in the head to knock him down. It's not enough to have Fallon on the ground, so Reynolds delivers more forceful punches to him. How does Fallon retaliate? By biting the wicked man's neck. Since this happens, we see many gory images. Back in the past, the redcoat stands near Fallon. He seems to advise the man to consume the life liquid from his... In the present, Fallon wakes up from his brutal attack whilst Reynolds walks through the forest. He hears a voice calling his name. Fallon got him well with the bite, for the man is struggling to walk. The voice speaks again, telling him to go somewhere. Upon returning to the bar, his friend asks what happened to his neck. He also says Fallon told him that his uniform doesn't mean anything around there. Petrie gives him a shot of alcohol, which Reynolds spits out in disgust. It seems like he got affected by the bite. Yan sees how Fallon struggles to walk back to her home. She rushes to him to see if he is injured, but he grabs her arm to say he fell. Later, Reynolds starts giving a speech at his mom's funeral. She didn't believe in heaven, he says. The woman considered it an idea created by the rich to keep the poor in their place. What she believed in was this country. Reynolds says there was a time when her faith was justified. However, the times have changed because the system is broken. The outsiders are getting what they want, and people like him who belong there don't get anything. He says people like his father made this country into something. They worked with the soil and it was in their blood. They would have defended the soil until every drop of their blood dripped from them. Reynolds gets emotional, saying people like his dad are no longer present. Now they are left with nothing except foreigners and fear. He likens it to them being poisoned. It's the reason his mom got brainwashed into believing the red coat nonsense. We see the neck bite is bothering him. Regardless of that, the vile man is too angry to stop. He continues by saying his mother stopped going to church, especially once his dad perished, but she knew the Bible. Thus he starts reading a passage from it that highlights his plight. It is about being rescued from invaders whose mouths are full of lies. As he keeps reading it, the passage doesn't stop giving him what he wants to hear. After he finishes, we see Fallon is among the crowd. He arrives at Yan's home and advises her to leave with her family. She tells him they aren't leaving yet. He insists. The man saw Reynolds' fury, so he knows what is coming. At the bar, Reynolds yells at the customers to leave. He even calls them parasites. Following this, he orders his henchmen to take Yan to the factory. Switching to her, we observe that she listened to Fallon concerning leaving. They just need Edward now to get out of there. Therefore, the focus falls on him as he gets dropped off by the school bus. It is unfortunate that he sees Petrie in the distance. The boy is holding a knife. Rachel is also nearby, yelling to Edward that they are coming for him. Edward is left with no choice except to run at Petrie, who does the same thing to him. This results in a fight on the ground. Rachel attempts to take Petrie off, but the foul boy doesn't let her. He tries to use his knife on Edward, only to tragically stab the innocent Rachel because she intervenes. In the next scene, Petrie is no longer there, and Edward holds the girl he possibly likes. His mother is there, running to him to offer her aid. Woefully, it seems like Rachel loses her life, and Edward mourns over it. Fallon simply stands there to watch. Going back 10 years again, Fallon wakes up near the tree during daylight. He makes a memorial for his deceased girlfriend. In the present, the policeman enters his car, where he is unlucky to meet Fallon in the passenger seat pointing a gun at him. He wants to know where Reynolds is, and the officer says he's inside. He also says something is wrong with him. Once he starts laughing, Fallon knocks him out. He enters the bar, seeing Petrie suffering on the floor. The boy is profoundly injured with no hope of surviving. Outside the bar, we see the officer seems to have regained his consciousness in a short time. He is getting ready to slam Fallon with a pipe. He thinks there is no way his attempt will fail, but it does. Fallon surprises him and holds the corrupt lawman against his car. He demands that he tell Fallon where Reynolds is without lying this time. Reynolds took the family to the factory is the answer he gets. Thus we switch to the factory, where the antagonist furiously takes the life of his own man. The family is there, frightened due to witnessing it. Reynolds starts addressing them, saying they are supposed to be smart. However, they have demonstrated the opposite by refusing to leave, despite being told by him. The racist man draws close to his daughter, and Edward tells his mom to run with Emily. When they do, Edward jumps on Reynolds but gets knocked off. While Reynolds deals with him, we see Jan hiding Emily in a cabinet. She tells her young daughter to be quiet before saying she loves her. Afterward, Jan collects a mallet that is inside and closes Emily. She hears Reynolds yelling for her to show herself, or he will bring about the demise of her son. She approaches him, demanding that he get away from Edward. Reynolds tells her the boy took the life of his single child, not knowing it was actually caused by Petrie. Now he wants Edward to watch how he butchers his mom prior to assassinating the boy. He notices Fallon standing there. Reynolds says he knows him, and that they took his life, so he starts to walk towards the man he thought was gone long ago, yet quickly diverges to offer a surprise attempt at hurting Jan. Thankfully, Fallon predicts his ugly move and stabs Reynolds with a sharp stick. As he holds the foul man, he whispers they can rest now. The next scene has Fallon using Reynolds' truck to drive them both somewhere. Of course, the location they arrive at is the place of the legendary tree. Fallon places Reynolds on the ground before pouring gasoline around him to form a circle. He gets behind the man who executed his girlfriend to hold him in place. Fallon has decided that neither of them needs to be there, as he throws a lit lighter on the ground for the flames to surround them. The agonized man remembers his girlfriend one last time, until we observe a massive fire, claiming the duo and the tree with the sorrowful past. The final scene has Emily placing a photo of her deceased father on the ground to form a memorial for him.